Afternoon, everyone. Still waiting on a few people here, but we'll get going in the interest of time. I'd like to thank everybody for attending this afternoon. My name is Tim Faulkner, and we're going to be talking about school zone circulation, creating calm out of chaos, a topic that is near and dear to all of our hearts. So, a couple of housekeeping items before we begin. In terms of the webinar, you can submit your any questions you have in writing through your control panel. And then if you want to ask any questions, you can also raise your hand. And we've had somebody that is also moderating this, so that will help me along with the questions. And then also for clarity purposes, we've muted all of your audio so you can hear me better and there's no background noise. Again, my name's Tim Faulkner. I'm a professional engineer, also a road safety professional one. I'm a senior traffic engineer with Fisher Associates, and I run our Syracuse office. I've got about 34 years of experience, worked in major metropolitan areas such as Boston for about 8 years, and then moved back to Onondaga County where I grew up and have been working here ever since. But more importantly, I've also got 5 grown adult kids that were part of the drive me to school culture. So, and they were like that until they were able to drive themselves to school. And then they started doing that. So I've survived the pickup and drop off adventures with only a few nightmares, many stories, no dings or scratches on my car, but a lot of close calls. So with that, we'll kind of get into our webinar this afternoon. So to start out, we'll give you a little introduction on why we're doing this webinar. We'll talk about the importance of safety, present a couple case studies for a project that we just recently did for a school district here in Onondaga County, and then talk about a toolbox of solutions that school districts can use, and anybody that's on here that are from the DOTs that can also help some of the school districts with their issues that they have. So in terms of introduction, as fewer families walk, bike, or bus, and more drive their children to school, the arrival and departure procedures become a common safety issues for schools. Schools that were designed in the 50s and 60s weren't really designed for the amount of drop-off and pickup they have now. The schools back then, when they were designed, it was mostly kids being bused to school or walking or biking. But now, parents driving their kids to school are one of the predominant forms of transportation to and from school. So too many people want to be in the same place at the same time. There's high traffic volumes around schools that can also have effect of discouraging people from walking because they feel it's unsafe. A chaotic environment immediately before and after school is also an educational climate issue as well as a safety hazard. And sometimes called the parent pickup and drop off rage, a high stress environment in front of the school can negatively impact the learning environment. So really what we want to do is we want to try and organize this and make it as calm and less chaotic as possible. And working with these school districts, I can tell you that the number one complaint are coming from the bus drivers themselves. They're frustrated by the way people are acting in their school zones, the way people are driving, the way kids are walking and not paying attention, and it's a very unsafe condition. So kind of the genesis of this webinar, I was actually watching a town hall meeting on one of the news channels back in May, and they had a bunch of school administrators on this town hall, and they were talking about the impacts of COVID-19 on their schools and how they're going to work. And one of the discussions was about how they're going to get kids to and from school. And in light of the CDC guidelines requiring social distancing and keeping a minimum of 6 feet in between individuals, and then parents also having a fear of putting their kids on school buses. Just as a point of note, typically the school buses or the seats in the school buses are about 40 inches long, and they're spaced out at about every 30 inches. So really you can only have one kid in each seat, and then you have to skip a seat. So really the buses are reduced to approximately 25% of capacity. And what they were talking about in this town hall was that they were going to be encouraging the parents to drop their kids off and pick them up rather than putting them on the school bus. A lot of schools don't have the number of buses that are needed to transport kids at 25% capacity. And they were also going to encourage kids to walk or bike to school. So that was kind of the genesis of, why we came up with this webinar, because, the drop off and pickup areas are chaotic enough as it is. And now when you're going to be increasing the amount of traffic, both vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle, it's going to make it even worse. So why is school zone circulation so important? These are some statistics that I found. There's about 100 kids that are killed every year while walking to or from school. And about half of those deaths are children in or near school zones that are kids that are 15 years or older, which, you would think that those kids that are older would be less likely to die in a vehicle pedestrian accident, but it's actually a lot greater than that. Transportation Research Board reports there are about 25,000 kids injured every year in school zones. And again, pedestrian deaths in the school zones have decreased in recent years for the children under 12. However, the death rate has increased for those older than 12. And that's likely due to the fact that more kids are using electronics while they're walking, whether they have their headphones in or they're texting, and they're not really paying attention to what they should be doing. Some other statistics: about approximately 5 teens pedestrians are killed every week in the United States. There's been a 13% increase in the pedestrian death rate for kids that are 12 to 19-year-old. And then teens between the age of 15 and 19 that only make up about 26% of all school-age children. They account for about half of the pedestrian fatalities. And then again, distracted walking is on the rise. Approximately 1 in 4 high school students are distracted while they're walking, and 1 in 6 middle school students are. So what are these distracted teens doing? They're most likely to be wearing headphones or texting. Approximately 80% of these students were observed crossing the street unsafely. And then the unsafe drop-off and pickup, about 1 in 3 drivers were doing something wrong in the pickup drop-off areas. And this is based on a survey that was done back in October of 2016. Approximately 39,000 middle school and high school students and 56,000 drivers at schools all across the United States, from rural to suburban to urban environments. So it was a broad cross-section of survey participants. And all of this was based on observations of what was going on at these schools. So in terms of the school zone, these are some of the what might impact drop-off or pickup behavior. Most of the schools that were surveyed had school zones that were clearly marked. However, less than 50% of them had speed limits of 20 miles per hour or less. And that 20-mile-per-hour speed limit is very critical, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the survey in terms of survivability of being hit by a car at a speed of 20 miles per hour. A number of schools, more middle schools and high schools, had personnel directing traffic. There were specified drop-off zones in the majority of schools that were surveyed. However, only about half of those were isolated, meaning that they were away from this flow of bus traffic and pedestrian traffic and those types of things. It was a totally separate environment. So, which is sort of what we're trying to get to, is trying to isolate those things from happening. So, in terms of what the parents are doing. You can see that approximately 1 in 3 are doing some type of unsafe drop-off or pickup. Generally, 25% of them are not following the rules of the road. Some of them are double parked. They're parking the opposite side of the street and letting their kids out and then crossing the street. And then they're also blocking crosswalks. The survey also showed that that drivers dropping off or picking up students at schools in disadvantaged areas were twice as likely to be distracted as they were compared to suburban or urban, where there was not disadvantaged kids. The smaller, less densely populated locale of the school, the greater the odds of distracted behavior. And really this is kind of concerning because in those rural locations, there's really no traffic calming strategies in place compared to the larger centers or more in urban environments. The other significant factors that were part of the study were that the gender, time of day, and speed limit. Female drivers were more likely to be distracted than male drivers, and that distraction was more likely greater during the afternoon pickup in the school zones. And then again, nearly 1 in 3 drivers displayed the unsafe drop-off and pickup behaviors. So that survey also looked at drop-off pickup policies, whether the schools had them or not, and a large percentage of them did have the drop-off pickup policies. However, they weren't enforced consistently throughout the year, and where drivers where the policy was enforced were significantly more likely to engage in behavior that was safe rather than in the areas where it wasn't enforced, and people just were kind of doing what they wanted to. So this suggests that having a drop-off pickup policy is not enough, but the schools really need to look at enforcing them on a consistent basis. Not meaning that they need somebody out there every day policing it, but it has to be very frequently, whether it's once a week, to make sure people are obeying what should be done in the drop-off pickup procedures. So in terms of appropriate pedestrian behaviors in school zones, we kind of split them up into 3 different areas: desired, problem, and high risk. In desired behaviors, we like the pedestrians to cross at a crosswalk or at a corner, and then either enter or exit a vehicle from the curbside. Problem behaviors where issues start to occur is when those kids are entering or exiting vehicles from the street side. They're crossing the street distracted, whether it's by electronic devices or they're talking with their friends or other people that rode with them. They're walking through moving traffic. This is more prevalent in school campuses where there's a lot of parking lots and parents are dropping off their kids in parking lots and the kids are walking through them, or they're having to walk across a bus loop. And also crossing mid-block, with an adult. Ideally we like them to cross at a crosswalk. And then the high-risk behaviors for pedestrians are crossing against the signals and crossing mid-block without an adult. Those are the 2 biggest high-risk behaviors. In terms of the driver behaviors in school zones, desired ones are we like we want to encourage the people that are dropping their kids off to actually park their car and walk the kid to school if a curbside drop-off is not available. So involves them getting out of their car and then walking their kid up to the school. And then the drop off and pick up and go, there's no lingering. The drop off and go is usually not an issue, that most parents can just drop their kids off and the kids get out of the car and they go. It's really the pick up and go is the issue. I think in almost every school district that I've worked with, the pick up in the afternoon is usually the biggest headache, because there are kids or there are parents that love to get there 15 or 20 minutes early, start clogging up the drop off or the pickup lane, thinking their kids are going to be the first out of school and the last. And those cars are sitting there just causing total chaos. So in terms of other problem behaviors, they do not pull to the curb when they either pick up or drop off their kid. They use the bus zone, which is a big no-no. They're going in the wrong direction during the drop-off pickup area. They park in a crosswalk. They load in a travel lane, so the car will actually stop in a travel lane. This is frequently seen around the more urban districts where the schools are right adjacent to the local roadways, and you see the parents, instead of pulling to the curb because either the curb is jam-packed or there's something in the way, that they'll just drop their kid off in the middle of the road. And they also block driveways and sidewalks. And then the high-risk behaviors are backing up and making U-turns, either in the middle of the road or in the middle of a drop-off area. Those are 2 things that we definitely don't want to see, but I have seen. So in terms of the golden rule, and this is kind of what I like to use, is we want to separate all modes of travel. buses, cars, people walking, and bike riders all need a well-defined, separated approach to the campus. So when looking comprehensively at procedures you'd like to desire for your school districts, like to keep in mind the following rules of thumb. The safety of the students on foot is the primary goal, whether it's somebody walking or somebody biking. Their safety is the most important. And sometimes when you increase driver convenience and relieving traffic congestion, that often worsens conditions for pedestrians and bicyclists. And that should not be a primary focus of trying to get, making it easier for the parents to drop off or pick up. Decisions about in-school circulation, where students enter and exit the school and which doors remain unlocked, should be considered together with external circulation choices. This has really kind of come to the forefront over the past 3 or 4 years, where school safety has become primary importance with all the school shootings that have been happening across the country. More schools are locking down and only allowing kids into or out of the school at 1 or 2 key locations, and those need to be considered within the context of where the kids are going or where they're coming from once they're out of the school building itself. So the pickup and drop off by car most often requires staffing supervision to function safely. Like I said, making U-turns or backing up are among the least safe things that they can do. And that the arrival and departure procedures require updates, constant maintenance, and enforcement. So now I'd like to go through a couple case studies that we did for the Fayetteville-Manlius School District. One was for the high school, and one was for the Eagle Hill Middle School, Enders Road Elementary School Complex. And they contracted with us to do a comprehensive circulation assessment of both of these schools as part of a long-range capital planning that they're going on to implement changes both internally and externally over the next 10 to 15 years. And they wanted to get an idea for capital budgets of what things would cost if they wanted to implement some of these procedures, these recommendations that we made. So the Fayetteville-Manlius School District is located in Onondaga County in the town of Manlius, New York, and it's located in the eastern suburbs of the county, and it's mainly an upper middle class area. The high school is located in the northeast portion of the district, and the middle school elementary school complex is located in the southeast portion and covers really the southern portion of the county, or the southern portion of the school district, and then some of the southwest portion of the school district. So that one school covers a lot of area in terms of how many students are going to it. So the main issues for the Fayetteville-Manlius High School, the mix of parent drop-off and pickup and student driver traffic, and mixing of that traffic with bus traffic. And you'll see in a couple slides here the chaos that's created when that happens. There's multiple parent drop-off pickup locations. One of them is located in a bus drop-off loop. And they also have very difficult access in terms of getting into or out of their campus itself. So just for a little background on the high school, there's about 1,500 students, 220 staff, and then they also have parking for about 275 students in this parking lot that's back here off to the right side of the aerial. So they have one main entrance, which is through this residential area here, and which is a cause of great concern and issue with the residents, even though the school came well before the houses were built there. There's always a lot of complaints about traffic driving through the residential area. They also have a one-way exit onto the main state highway, which is State Route 173 here, but it's just an exit only. And then they have this rear access, it's called Pride Lane, that goes, it's a two-way roadway that goes out to a town roadway. So when we were looking at this, we did some traffic counts to kind of assess where people are coming from and going to. There's about, in the morning, there's about 750 entering and 400 exiting vehicles. So there's a lot of traffic that's flowing through this little small area here. And then the majority of people arrive through the residential driveway here and exit through the one-way exit over here. So, and about 15% of the traffic uses this rear access. So as part of our recommendations to the school district, what we talked to them about was creating a new grand boulevard entrance to the school campus off of the main state route and putting in a traffic signal here. This would, during the school times, this entrance and exit would only be allowed for staff and buses. And same with the main entrance through the residential area would be staff and buses only. We thought that that would be an acceptable mix of traffic because typically the staff is there long before the buses are dropping kids off or picking them up.